Kriti Sharma. She's a Forbes 30 Under 30 recipient. She's presented several TED Talks on AI, and she's been called one of the world's leading artificial intelligence technologists. And she's my guest on #Trending, the weekend edition. It'll be available anytime after midnight tonight. Governments struggle to regulate AI. Mixed signals continue with regard to optimism or pessimism in tech spending. And artificial intelligence is making some employees so productive they can do the jobs of two people and maybe get paid for both. These stories and more on #Trending for Friday, April 28th. I'm your host, Jim Love, CIO of IT World Canada and Tech News Day in the U.S. Governments are struggling to control what might seem like the unstoppable force of AI development. They know there will be massive impact. They know there are risks. But how do you regulate something that we barely understand in terms of its capabilities today and that's evolving at an unimaginable rate? And competition between companies and even countries means we can't sacrifice safety for superiority, can we? Google and others can't let Microsoft dominate without a fight. Even at the government level, can the U.S. cede the field to China in terms of AI superiority? There's a growing sense of alarm in the public and in government. Senator Chris Murphy summed up the government's dilemma when he said last month, "Something's coming, and we are not ready." In the U.S., Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is trying to develop legislation to regulate artificial intelligence technology, according to a report from Axios, and Schumer is reported to have met with Elon Musk and others in trying to draft a workable framework for regulation. The National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, has put out an AI risk management framework earlier this year. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy has also published a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. And according to a report in Axios, the government approach is consolidating around 4 principles. The U.S. approach centers around transparency and disclosure, identification of who trained the algorithm and who its intended audience is, the disclosure of its data sources, an explanation of how it arrives at its responses, and transparent and strong ethical boundaries. Now, this is pretty much what experts are looking for, although many want the regulation to go much further than simple principles. And if the U.S. government seems reluctant to regulate technology, the Chinese government is not. It has earlier issued guidelines on transparency of algorithms and models. According to a report originally in the New York Times, the Chinese government has issued draft regulations that say that companies must ensure their algorithms are truthful and respect intellectual property and must register their algorithms with the government. But they go further and require that companies must heed the Chinese Communist Party's strict censorship rules, just as websites and apps have to avoid publishing material that besmirches Chinese leaders or rehashes forbidden history. The content of AI systems will need to reflect socialist core values and avoid information that undermines state power or national unity. The article reports that Chinese scientists are struggling to figure out how to comply with this while struggling to catch up with U.S. developments like ChatGPT. And it's not that easy. For instance, any Chinese AI must know a myriad of things that it can't talk about. And if you think Google's Bard faux pas where the chatbot got the answer wrong about the discovery of a planet, if you thought that was a big deal, a recent Chinese AI got more than 10,000 inquiries in its first hour, but gave answers that were less than favorable about the Chinese economy and described the Russia-Ukrainian conflict as a war of aggression. The entrepreneur shut it down and said he was working to develop a more patriotic bot. The bot was supposed to resume February 13th, according to screenshots that read, "Service will resume when troubleshooting is complete." As of today, it appears they are still troubleshooting. Now, we're getting mixed and often contradictory signals with regard to the state of the tech industry. We've reported on Microsoft and Google having positive results exceeding analyst expectations, largely from their cloud divisions. Google's cloud showed a profit for the first time ever. On the other hand, Dropbox, the cloud storage company, has announced that it will reduce its global workforce by 16% to cut costs due to a slowing cloud growth. Dropbox's CEO Drew Houston said that the company's core cloud growth was slowing as the economic downturn was putting pressure on its customers, making some investments no longer sustainable. Dropbox also noted that it will be hiring new resources to build out its AI offerings in an attempt to keep up with the growing competition in that area. Wipro, the Indian outsourcing giant, reported that its growth in the current quarter could be as low as 0.06% as clients cut down on discretionary spending. Another of the global Indian outsourcers, Infosys, reported slower growth in the range more of 4 to 8% as customers in the US and Europe postpone or cancel deals due to the weakening global economy. And on the other hand, Meta, parent of Facebook, after 3 quarters of declining earnings, saw year-over-year revenue growth. Meta's predictions were actually that revenue would decline in the last quarter, but it increased by 3%, despite continued losses in Reality Labs, where its metaverse development continues. Meta's revenue growth is largely from a rebound in advertising spending, which is generally a sign of optimism. Maybe Charles Dickens got it right when he said, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." Every year, there's a new set of studies on passwords, usually talking about how simple and easy to guess they are. Passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and even password hit the #1 lists. A new study from Bitwarden confirms that 45% of people surveyed had easy-to-guess or simple passwords. Other bad practices in the report include sharing passwords by email, often unencrypted email, or in unencrypted documents. Close to 40% admitted to both of these. But the shocking number is that 90% of decision makers reuse passwords. Now, if there's one thing that makes your password easier to crack than a ridiculously simple one like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's reusing a password. Chances are that almost every password you used in the past has found its way into one of the huge repositories of passwords that are used in so-called dictionary attacks, where hackers cycle through a list of passwords. But when you reuse a password that has been compromised, it makes it even easier. Phishing you on Facebook might also get your banking or even your corporate passwords. And that's why you were told, presumably by some of these decision makers, never to reuse passwords. Another finding of the survey, 60% of those surveyed said they've been a victim of a cyber attack. And I wonder if any of those decision makers who were surveyed would see any correlation between these things. And the use of AI is making some employees more productive. So productive, they could do the work of 2 people and maybe get paid for it. Vice's Motherboard interviewed workers who were adopting AI and found that someone, they'll use the pseudonym Ben, had become so productive using the new release of ChatGPT-4 at his current job, he was able to apply for and get a second job and do both at once. He occasionally has to tweak the content, but he told Vice, ChatGPT does like 80% of my job, if I'm being honest. So he applied for a second job, and he got it, using, of course, ChatGPT to write his cover letters. He said, "That's the only reason I got my job this year." Now, how does Ben manage his 2 bosses? Well, you don't need AI to predict this one. He's using ChatGPT, and he's trained ChatGPT to write in all lowercase to make his messages to his new bosses seem more authentic. I guess once you can fake sincerity, you got it made. And that's the top tech news for today. Hashtag Trending goes to air with a daily newscast 5 days a week, as well as a special weekend interview with an expert on topics relevant to today's tech news. You can follow us on Google, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can even get us on your Alexa or Google Smart Speaker. We love your comments, and you can reach me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or on Mastodon at @TheRealJimLove on our Mastodon site, technews.social. Or if that's too much, just leave a comment under the text version at itworldcanada.com/podcasts. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a fabulous Friday.